Would you ask Mr. Ewing to come back in, please? Yes, do sit down, Mr. Ewing. All right, ready to carry on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Grange.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr. Ewing, sticking with the K15 story for now, on the 21st of January, if we go to LABC 302852, there's an email that you send at the top there to Lorna Stimpson, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Turner and Mr. Hammond. And you say this: NHBC have several large sites all using the material outside of the tested specification. As such, their special risks team are jumping up and down. There was initial concern raised that our registered detail inferred global approval, and this has been amended since January 2014 when BBA revised their agreement certificate for the product. Kingspan had it tested last year by the BRE, and the results were a pass to the requisite tests. The collapse of the material as it burnt. We don't know if the test carried out by Celotex for their rival product was redacted to exclude this information from us. Now, taking that email in stages, so we know that the special risk team of the NHBC are jumping up and down, so they're very agitated at this time, is that right?
Yes, I think they're very concerned about projects they had ongoing.
And were you...
Sorry, I take it the special risks team refer to the warranty?
Yes, in terms of the warranty of the existing buildings.
Yes. And were you similarly agitated and concerned about the number of projects where LABC approval may have been given based on LABC certificates?
At this stage, we were revising the registered detail to include all the relevant test data being provided with. The registered detail had been taken down on the 1st of December, and we were trying to get things up and running to reissue the registered detail with the relevant classification reports and test data. But in terms of the inappropriate phrase jumping up and down, it was that effectively was a notification about what was going on, and right. I was hoping that the earlier emails in relation to technical working group and indeed so the guidance to membership might be something might be happening in relation to that aspect.
Yes. Why do you say there was initial concern raised that our registered detail inferred global approval, and this has been amended since January 2014? That's not right, is it? You'd been issuing certificates in August 2014, extending through to October, and then extending to November, which inferred global approval.
Yes, I think the phrase in there is it's not when we revised the registered detail in January, it was when the Agrimon revised their certificate, which was December 2013.
Yes, but can we agree that the readers of this email might have thought that you had amended something since January 2014 rather than just the BBA had been amended since then?
The way that the email reads, yes, I have to agree with you.
Yeah. Now, what we know happens next is that at the end of January, for the transcript, this is LABC 40883. At the end of January 2015, 26th of January, you send an email to Philip Carney of the BRE asking for help. You specifically asked for Stephen Howard to cast an eye over the revised LABC certificate. Now, can you explain why it took the LABC so long to reach out for help from an organisation like the BBA? It's like the BRE, given, frankly, the mess that you'd got into prior to this time with your certificates.
In terms of the length of time, no. In terms of developing and trying to create something that was absolutely watertight as far as the registered detail goes, it was a reach out at that point whilst there was no valid certificate in place.
So can you explain the failure to do that much earlier?
No, I can't. I think it would become obvious at that point the extent of what was happening within the industry, that there were more stories coming out around the products itself, and it was really, I suppose, one my knowledge had improved from the initial start, I suppose, from July to the point where I now recognised the intricacies of the sort of effectively minor variations in specification, and I wanted, rather than taking the viewpoint from NHBC, and that's not being disrespectful to NHBC, I wanted that people that undertake the actual test to advise us on the quality of the testing and specification.
Yes. Let's just look at an email you sent Barry Turner just after this. So this is LABC 305804, and I want to look at page 2. There's an email 30th of January 2015 at 11:59 on page 2. Sorry, it's 11:19. You say, "Hi Barry, I've just spoken to Philip Carney regarding K15, who has suggested a quick meeting with Steve Howard, the fire tester at BRE. Exact wording used was discussion in confidence to avoid LABC digging a bigger hole than they might already be in!" Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Now, was that your wording used to Philip Carney to describe the situation you perceived yourself to be in, or was that wording used by the BRE?
That was BRE.
BRE used that wording?
Yes.
So they were aware that the LABC was in a difficult spot at this point?
Not in relation to the registered detail. I think what that email or that wording was alluding to was in relation to testing that BRE been carrying out in relation to insulation materials, and there was concern about the impact of using insulation in high level.
I see. So was the BRE aware that LABC had been endorsing the use of these combustible insulation products on buildings over 18 metres, and that presented some difficulties for you?
I'm not sure that they were, no. BRE may well confirm that, but as I understood that, it was around Philip Carney, who I met on reasonably frequent occasions through my role with registered details. That was effectively saying that there's things going on that they can't tell me about because of client confidentiality at BRE, but we need to be aware of them from LABC's perspective.
Right, I see. But they perceived you to be in a big hole at that point, yes?
I'm assuming it's in relation to because we are looking at providing a registered detail for an insulation product, that we'd need to be mindful about how we, or the phrasing that we used.
Right, I see. Now, you arranged a meeting with the BRE on the 9th of February for the transcript. We can see you arranging that at LABC 305808. And then following that following that meeting, you email your colleagues. If we can go to LABC 40931. You say to Mr. Turner, copying in Ms. Stimpson and Mr. Brennan, "Hi Barry, I met with Steve Howard and Philip Carney this morning regarding K15. There were no great shocks. However, we would be approaching the registered detailed certificate issue correctly if we cross-reference our document to the BRE classification reports issued for K15 or any other product, rather than the testing report sent through to us." And then they say, in respect of the testing, there is no underlining latent defect created through the BS 8414 fire test in relation to material stability. The fact that debris falls away is not presently a factor because at the temperatures involved there will already be falling glass and UPVC frames dropping onto anyone below. And then you go on And then in the next paragraph, you say, as such, if you're in agreement, I'll amend the certificate accordingly after I've received confirmation from Kingspan of the relevant classification reports. And in the beginning of the next paragraph, you say, I've also amended the wording in the BCA Guidance Note 18 to clarify this and would request that it's offered to the group for consideration. Now, just taking it in stages, do you recall, was anything said at this meeting about the LABC having historically issued erroneous statements about K15, including that it had global approval for use over 18 metres?
Not that I recall now.
So were you just focused on the future and what you should say about the
Yes.
product in the future?
Yes.
And did you ever run the wording, we'll see the wording in a minute that you used, did you ever run that wording past the BRE specifically?
I'm not sure. I think I had enough information from them to understand the way that I was proposing was going to be the right way, but I don't recall actually formalising it and sending it away to them unless you can show me that I have.
It doesn't look like you did. I'm just asking whether or not you consulted them over specific wording you used.
Not that no, I don't believe I did.
And what exactly are you referring to there when you say you would amend the wording in the BCA Guidance Note 18 to clarify this? Was that to clarify points about burning debris, falling debris after the fire test had been carried out?
It was the concern in this was around modification to a tested wall system that had a classification report. And I want to know, in terms of people have referred to them as variation reports, that they are going to use a 70mm insulation instead of an 80mm insulation. And have you taken that at 70mm that wall system will perform in the same way? It's not detrimental to the performance of the system. And that was what I wanted to understand from BRE as to what should be done. So the recommendation through to BCA was that in all instances we have a classification report, and any variation to that classification report should, like a variation to that classification, should also be undertaken by an accredited or UCAS accredited expert.
What do you mean by a variation to the classification report? Do you mean an extension of it, like an extrapolation of it?
Yes, it's effectively using an alternative fixing detail. It could be a bigger cavity, it could be thicker insulation, it could be a different type of cladding system on there.
So you wanted that to be assessed by the same people who'd issued the original classification report?
From our perspective on the rest of the detail, that's what I wanted to tighten it up to, so that it wasn't down to somebody else's opinion that that'll still perform okay because we've had a classification report before.
I see, thank you. And now, on the 16th of February 2015, you then emailed a revision of the K15 Registered Detailed Certificate to Mr Turner, Mr Smith and Mr Brennan. For the transcript, that's LABC 40959. And after exchanging further emails in which the certificate was being finalised, on the 30th of March, you emailed saying you've now got thumbs up from Kingspan for the K15 certificate. That's at LABC 40854. Let's go to that certificate. It's at LABC 40855. And on page 1, we have the wording which Mr Turner drafted in that description of product, which I've already been through with you, yes?
Yes.
And then we see at page 2, the details of the tests which Kingspan had done are there under the conditions of certificate on page 2. Do you see this?
Yes.
So we can see it says, just above where the bold words are, there's a paragraph that says K15 has been successfully tested to BS 8414 and BS 8 Part 1 and Part 2, meeting the criteria set out in BR 135 and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings with stories above 18 metres in height, subject to matching the explicit criteria identified in the tested specifications below, an overall risk assessment of the finished building in relation to B4, see scope above. And then you've got a description of the systems that were tested to Part 1 and then the system tested to part 2 below that. Do you see that?
Yes.
But you've still got the phrase that begins that K15 has been successfully tested to, as in the product has been successfully tested to, and meets the criteria set out in BR 135. Again, can you accept that the wording would have been better if it had said K15 can only be used over 18 metres if it is used in the systems exactly as described below? Why didn't you have something like that?
With hindsight, that says, or that flows much easier than the wording I've got there. But I mean, it is actually saying subject to matching explicit criteria identified.
Yes, it does say that, but I'm picking up on the wording just before that.
Yes. So yes, it could have been reworded as you're suggesting.
Now, I want to go now to some minutes from a meeting in June 2015. If we go to LABC 40874. These are minutes and actions of the LABC and LABC warranty registered details JMC. What's a JMC?
I think it stood for Joint Management Committee.
And it's held on the 24th of June 2015. And if we could go to the bottom of page 1, item 4, it says this: breaches and contraventions. The registration of Kingspan K15 was discussed and potential to increase scope in light of client dissatisfaction with NHBC's stance on situation. Business opportunity if way forward can be resolved. Meeting suggested with Kingspan, RS to arrange. Now, who's RS there?
That's Richard Smith.
Yeah. Now, can you help us as to what was discussed under this item?
Well, the meeting was a quarterly meeting between LABC and LABC Warranty to talk about joint working, I suppose. John Gilbert, who is my counterpart at LABC Warranty, would look at products for registered detail to see if it met warranties, structural warranty requirements as well, and if it did, we could provide a joint registered detail for that. So there was I suppose this is how it was working in relation to the competition LABC was in. NHBC had their own warranty and building control teams. This was the equivalent, which was LABC building control and LABC warranty.
Yes. But on the specific issue that's being discussed there, are these minutes accurate that it was viewed as a business opportunity for the LABC, that there was client dissatisfaction with NHBC's stance on K15?
I believe the minutes were taken by LABC Warranty, not ourselves. So the viewpoints here are from a warranty perspective as opposed to our LABC. But I think it was. I think that, if I remember rightly, NHBC's stance in terms of approval on new buildings had changed, and LABC Warranty were wondering if that was an opportunity for them to look at.
Yes, I mean, should we read this as NHBC were getting tougher with the use of K15 on tall buildings, and LABC was seeing this as a potential business opportunity to cash in on that by being softer?
Well, I suppose in terms of the warranty side, you'd have to ask LABC Warranty on that. It certainly looks like that as to how it's written.
Is that how you understood it at the time?
It was. I think it was more that there was an opportunity to talk with clients who were solid NHBC. I think it was an opportunity to have a discussion around that. But it certainly reads, on there that there's a possible extra market, and that would have been on LABC Warranty's risk assessment of the sites that they were going to approach.
Yes, but can you explain how that was in any way appropriate, given the legitimate concerns which had been raised about K15's use over 18 metres, including by NHBC?
Well, from the registered details perspective, it was having additional classification reports. So we had more external wall systems that were being sanctioned through classification.
Why wasn't the LABC taking a strict line with Kingspan as well and standing alongside NHBC in its strict approach to compliance?
Well, I think, again, there's the two sides to this. This is LABC Warranties side in terms of the new build market. For LABC were working with NHBC as part of the Building Control Alliance and working to the guidance document that had been issued by that group.
You keep saying this was about LAB Warranties side. What was your side thinking about it? I mean, were you keen on the idea of it being a business opportunity to use NHBC's stricter stance to get more business?
I assumed that LABC Warranty would take that decision in light of everything that had gone off with NHBC, and they would make a judgment call on what was being proposed. I didn't think they were going to take a lighter or a softer touch with anybody.
Let's look at another email chain on a similar theme. If we go to LABC 305971. Now, this is a string of emails in which there's a discussion about the use of K15 on 16, 18 and 22-storey buildings on the waterfront at Woolwich. And picking it up at the bottom of page 1, we can see there's an email from Martin Taylor, LABC, to Gareth Barnbrook, copying you in, dated the 3rd of July 2015. And he says, "Morning, mate. Thanks again for doing tonight. I'm still playing chauffeur." And then third paragraph down, on 6, 7 and 8 Barnet have confirmed from a regulatory compliance point of view that they are happy with the use of K15, which is within their jurisdiction to do. I'm not sure if Warranty have confirmed that they are happy with it from a warranty perspective. If 6, 7, 8 and Woolwich are the same site, fine. If it's another one, it will have to be a matter for that particular LA as to whether they accept K15 from a regulatory compliance point of view. Then he says this, NHBC don't currently accept K15, hence the move to LABC. Whilst we can't be seen to be winning work on the basis of technical interpretation, I'm sure working with Kingspan that we can issue guidance to LA departments. They have asked for the product to go through registered details, and David is contacting them to arrange a meeting to discuss this issue in particular, but national guidance won't be issued in time to respond to this latest email. Now, it looks from this that this is exactly what the LABC is contemplating doing at the time, winning work on the basis of a lax technical interpretation that was not as rigorous as the interpretation of NHBC. Is that fair?
Well, this is July 2015, and from the registered detail perspective, I would be expecting, if that site is using an external wall system with classification reports that are part of that registered detail, then I would think that's they're demonstrating compliance with building regulations. If NHBC have moved completely away from Kingspan and are not accepting any of that, and the companies still want to use that product with a valid classification report, then to me that's compliant with building regulations.
Can you help us as to what you understood at the time? Did these buildings in question here have an identical construction to the 8414, either Part 1 or Part 2 test, which Kingspan had passed with K15 by this point?
I don't know.
Did you ever seek to find that out?
No, I don't believe I did.
Do you accept that looking at that email together with the meeting minute we looked at earlier, it seems to imply a pretty unattractive stance for the LABC to be taking to effectively cash in on winning work on the basis that NHBC were being stricter and you could take a softer approach to compliance?
Well, I think do accept that in terms of the context of the email. So there, it appears that, but I don't actually believe that. I think the issue here is that all of a sudden K15 wasn't acceptable for any NHBC site, and people obviously still wanted to use that on projects, or were still trying to use it on projects. So if that's being accepted for compliance with building regulations with a classification report, regardless of a registered detail, then that would still demonstrate compliance with building regulations.
Well, can I just ask you, if you knew that NHBC had declined to approve the use of K15, did it ever cross your mind as to why they had declined to do so?
I assume that this was the ongoing thread in relation to providing test reports, and it was also the previous sites that NHBC had, or the sites that were under construction, that Kingspan had told NHBC that was the responsibility of the developer to evidence compliance.
The only reason for NHBC to decline to approve K15, I think, would be that it hadn't demonstrated that it complied with the requirements of ADB. Is that right?
No, it might be purely on a warranty side. Again, you have these two hats on, and from warranty's perspective, they may well have made a judgment that they're not going to accept that on any sites in future, as opposed to my role, which is in relation to building regulation compliance.
From what you'd seen in the in the email traffic, any concern from the warranty aspect was also related to testing, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, but it may be. I suppose, and the only way I can explain that is that building regulations are demonstrating minimum compliance. Everybody can build more. Instead of using 325 millimetres of glass fibre, you can put 500 million there if you want to. The minimum is that side. So purely achieving the minimum, there is still, and it was always on the line that insurance particulars could request more. So if we're talking around industrial buildings, there may be a 60-minute fire resistance between a compartment wall between storage and shop. But insurance may actually insist on a 4-hour wall to protect the stock that they have in the storage area.
All right, thank you very much.
Is that what you actually thought at the time, that Steve Evans and NHBC were requiring Kingspan to go over and above what the minimum requirements were in the building regulations and ADB, and that's why there was some room for manoeuvre? Is that what you actually thought at the time?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I think it was the fact that industry clearly still wanted to use this product. NHBC were clearly not on good terms with Kingspan, and work was still moving on. And that was, if you like, an alternative way of progressing with projects.
Yes. But why is the fact that industry was still wanting to use this product relevant in any way whatsoever to whether, in fact, it was compliant and appropriate for use above 18 metres?
I can only answer that in relation to the role that I had, which was we were having classification reports demonstrated as the alternative way to comply with under 12.5 as opposed to using materials of limited combustibility. So that option of being able to comply with building regulations, which was a classification report showing that it met the performance criteria.
Yes, for one specific configuration.
For one, yes, absolutely. And that's all I...
So what you understood, all these buildings in which K15 was being used were identical to what the two classification reports you'd seen by this point, one with a steel frame, one with a masonry construction.
If they were being used on the site that was here, the decision was down to the local authority in terms of confirmation. I would hope that the registered detail would provide a bit more clarity for them, and indeed the guidance note that went out to membership on there, this is how you should be addressing that when you get an application deposited at your authority.
Okay. Now, just very, very briefly now, finally on K15, I just want to look at the certificate that was issued, the very final registered details certificate that was issued on the 14th of January 2016 and ran until 2019. Now, you describe this certificate. If we look at LABC 303186, on the 14th of January, you say, second email down on this page, you describe this in an email 14th January 2016 to Sam Lee Muller as, you say, this is a special one in that it's crucial we present the right information. Just briefly, why did you say that at that point?
I think it was the final paragraph there. I'm still debating how best to do this. What it was that the natural development of the registered detail was that we would start to build a library of classification reports for different external wall systems. I couldn't fit them all onto 2 pages, or we'd suddenly have a 14-page document that potentially people wouldn't flick through. So it was how best to present that, and in the end it was used as an appendices where it had the list of the classification reports attached.
Yes, let's look at the certificate that was issued, LABC 40971. This ran from March 2016 to March 2019. It's the EWWS 165. What does the EWWS tell us at the top?
So that's England and Wales in terms of building regulations.
Yeah.
W is that it meets the criteria for LABC warranty, structural standards.
Yeah.
And S is that it's local authority building standards Scotland, meeting Scottish building standards as well.
Yes. And we see the same description of product in that front box. K15 has been tested to comply with. I'm not going to go over that again. But if we go to page 2, the conditions of certificate, what we can see is if we blow up the conditions of certificate, it says in that last paragraph, K15 has been successfully tested to 8414 Part 1 and Part 2, meeting the criteria set out in BR 135, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings with stories over 18 metres in height, subject to matching the explicit criteria identified in the tested specifications held on the K15 Product Specification and Classification Report Index, updated in conjunction with this certificate. Now, that document was located on Kingspan's website, is that right?
I thought it was attached to the registered detail. I thought it was a supplementary sheet for it.
If we look at LABC 40972, this was the document.
Yes.
Now, is your understanding that that would have been attached to that last certificate or only available on Kingspan's website?
My understanding that was available on the LABC Registered Details website.
I see. Let's move on.
It might well have been on the Kingspan website in terms of showing evidence from that side as to how it linked to the registered detail.
Okay, let's move on now to Celotex RS 5000. And if we go back to your witness statement and look at pages 47 and 48, 47 first, you have helpfully provided a table for us at the bottom of the various certificates for RS 5000. There was a first certificate on the 29th of August 2014, which you describe as a system certificate for RS 5000. And that had a drawing and document list associated with it. I'm going to come to these in due course. That's in the row below. Then on the 3rd of November 2014, you tell us in the next row there was a new format LABC certificate for the product. And then you tell us that that was withdrawn on the 6th of November 2014. Is that right? Just 3 days after it was published, yes?
Yes.
And then you tell us at the bottom of that page, you tell us there was no LABC registration for RS 5000 in this time period between November 14 and June 15.
Yes.
And then over the page, we can see the next certificate was dated the 1st of July 2015. And then finally, there was another certificate dated the 10th of September 2015. And indeed, then another one, 19th of August 2016. So that's That's just a summary of the different certificates. Now, I want to look at some correspondence leading up to the first RS 5000 certificate being issued in August 2014. And you appear to have been made aware of Celotek's interest in obtaining a registered detail on the 29th of October 2013. If we go to LABC 308417, we can see there's an email to you from Mr. Brennan at the bottom of page 1, where he says, just spoke to Celotek, who are interested in registering a rain screen board. We'll let you know when they get back in touch. Cheers. And then you reply, cool, on the outside and warm on the inside, 2 exclamation marks, David. And then if we go up the page, he says, very, very cheesy. Then he says, they kept asking about their competitors and what your relationship was with them, how many times you would have met them. He said he couldn't tell me who he was talking about. I said, it's Kingspan, isn't it? And he said, yes. How did you know? These installation people think they're bloody MI5 agents. We'll see if they come back to us anyway, or we're just fishing for info about their arch nemesis. And then you say at the top of the page, we should keep some of your anecdotes to put in a book. Fabulous. Now, did you come to understand at the time why Celotek was so interested in your relationship with Kingspan? Was that ever explained?
No, not really. I met them, I think, in the November meeting with them. And I was asked some questions then, and I think that's probably what the context of that email thread is trying to find out, really looking at what Celotek needed to do to obtain a registered detail.
Yes, we can see from the correspondence that you met Mr. Roper, John Roper of Celotek, in November 2013. You explain that in your witness statement. Can you recall exactly what was discussed with Mr. Roper at this meeting? Can you give us the flavour of it?
Well, yes, not word for word, but in essence, I was told they were developing a new product, that they were about to start doing testing on it, wanted to try and get a registered detail because they wanted to compete with Kingspan K15, and what were the steps that were involved.
Were you told at the time that it was, in fact, not a new product, but the same as the FR 5000 product, that it had been selling for many years up until that point?
I don't believe I did. I know there was references in correspondence to FR 5000 because we actually brought that up in one of the certificates. I think we were asked to change it, but I wasn't specifically told we're just rebadging an old product. It was, we're developing a new product and about to start testing.
Right. Were you surprised in due course when you learnt that, in fact, this wasn't a new product, it was an old product?
Yes.
You were surprised? Yes. Were you given a tour of the manufacturing and testing facility when you went to visit them?
Yes, I think I was.
Did you see any data or other third-party accreditation or other test information when you went there?
No.
Now, you sent the quote for Celotek's RS 5000 registered details work to Mr. Renton and Mr. Gilbert. If we look at this is LABC 305302. So this is Bob Renton and John Gilbert. You say, hi, gents, please find attached next quote for Celotek. Information can be found at link below, an agreement certificate attached. Trust it is okay, can pick up on the Q&A element for design software later. In confidence, this may take some time as quote will be put to management for business plan to market against Kingspan K15 existing registered details. Now, first of all, why were you emailing those two gentlemen with this quote?
They were the two gentlemen involved. One, John Gilbert, is from Warranty. Bob Brenton is from Building Standards Scotland. So
right.
It's about harmonised registered detail.
And what did you mean when you said, in confidence, this may take some time as quote will be put to management for business plan to market against Kingspan K15?
I think I was making them aware that Celotek had asked for it to be done in confidence because they were considering developing the product.
Right. And you mention, you say in the first line, information can be found at link below and agreement certificate attached. There are two documents that you've attached. The first document is a BBA certificate in relation to a Celotex PIR plasterboard for thermal laminates. If we look at this, LABC 2014560. There it says Celotex insulation, Celotex PIR plasterboard, thermal laminates, thermal performance, behaviour and fire. Can you remember why you sent them this particular BBA certificate at this point?
I can't. I think it was just an indication in relation to its thermal performance.
I see. And for the transcript, what we see is then Mr. Gilbert responds to this, saying, seems fine to me, albeit he queried the supporting BBA certificate and said this would need to be discussed with Celotex. That was at LABC 305303. And Mr. Renton indicated his approval on the 28th of November 2013. That was at LABC 305308. You then send Mr. Roper an amended quotation for the registered details certificate dated the 22nd of November 2013. That's at LABC 301702. And then on the 19th of December, you emailed David Jones at Herefordshire Building Control. If we can go to that email, it's at LABC 305339. And you say this to Mr. Jones. Hi, Dave. Tried to phone today, but advised you're away on leave, so we'll try tomorrow. Then you go on in the next paragraph. Kingspan have recently applied for registered details certification for their new product, Optim R, etc. And then you go on in the next paragraph. I've also been approached by Celotex, who have queried our interpretation of ADB in relation to the K15 product. I have no technical data behind our archive system, so can't dig into it. Essentially, the query is in relation to use of a PUR board in a position requiring fire resistance, particularly if it is used over 18 metres, ADB for 12.5 to 12.7 and definition of limited combustibility. Wondered if there was any testing undertaken to demonstrate the external boarding protected the internal core of the board or any background on the research process undertaken. I appreciate this may have been some time ago as I think it was originally a land tax certificate. And then you go on, and then a few lines down you say, hope this makes sense. I've asked Celotex for more specific information, but before I go to Gareth at Kingspan, I thought I'd check with you first. So a query's been raised by Celotex about your interpretation of ADB in relation to the K15 product, and you've gone back to Mr. Jones to ask him about that. Is that correct?
It is. I was asked a question by Mr. Roper at the meeting in November, which was effectively how is Kingspan a material of limited combustibility?
Yeah.
And I couldn't answer the question because I physically couldn't answer the question. So in terms of my statement that I put through, at that point I believed I understood the difference between Class NOR and material of limited combustibility, and I couldn't answer the question, and I couldn't find the data within our poor system that we had at the time for information, so I asked it directly of Mr. Jones.
Yes. You say it was a poor system that you had at the time for information. Was it normal practice for the LABC not to retain technical data for the certificates which it had issued?
Well, I think other than the Herefordshire type approval that came through with the Kingspan document, I don't think there was a deal else sitting on the system, and I wanted to know what else had been done. And it is clear from that the majority, the reliance was on the agreement certificate that was in place at the time, the 2008 certificate.
Were you concerned about that situation, that you didn't have any technical information other than the certificate and the supporting documentation for it?
From the perspective of being able to answer that question, yes, which is why I raised the query with him.
Now, you received a response to your email from Mr. Jones. If we go to LABC 305351, on the 20th of December 2013, he comes back to you. And he can see, he says at the top, "Hi David, I'm not sure what specific issues have been raised by Celotex, but below are some extracts relevant to the fire performance and testing of K15. And what he does then is he sets out an extract from the BBA certificate. You see that there. And then if we go over the page, we can see he's also set out an extract from his internal assessment, he calls it. He says, and these from our internal assessment. Sorry, if we go back a page, I think it introduces what's at the top of that page. Go back to bottom of page 1. Yes, he's got an extract from Kingspan's own technical literature, which appears at the top of the next page. And then he's got, in blue, he says, and these from our internal assessment. And he's set out some information that was contained in that LABC type approval system document. And then at the end of his email, in the final 2 paragraphs, if we can go to that below this. He says this right at the very bottom. He says, essentially, as the board, so this is the blue text, essentially, as the board is described as class 0, it can be termed a material of limited combustibility. And so in terms of the relevant part of Doc B, it is suitable for use within the wall construction, even at heights over 18 metres. And then over the page, he says this, after setting out 12.7, there is no question of the board providing any fire resistance, as it can't do this in itself. But when used as part of a wall system which does provide fire resistance, the insulation board does not have a detrimental effect by virtue of its status of limited combustibility. And then he goes on about the checking purpose. Now, did you notice at the time that Mr. Jones was asserting that it could be termed a material of limited combustibility, and yet none of the information he'd attached in that email supported that conclusion?
It didn't answer the question that I was asking. I didn't understand it anymore from the purpose of me asking in the first place. And this is the first involvement that I'd had with the product, really. And it was the same way as the peer review. I assumed that it was something that I wasn't getting, that was already determined by both Mr. Jones and Barry Turner of LABC in terms of issuing the original system approval.
Yes.
So it's my mistake, and
yes.
I forwarded that on to John Roper to answer a question that he asked me at the meeting.
Yes, you do, and we'll look at that in a moment. So you say you were confused and you didn't understand it. Did you take any steps to try and understand it, or to seek any help from anybody else to understand it?
No, I didn't. At that time, I knew that I needed to start getting myself together, if you like, and to upskill my knowledge of this area. Yes.
Well, but if you didn't understand it, let's go to what you do next. You just send it to Mr. Roper, LABC 301706. There's an email from you to Mr. Roper there.
Yes.
And, sorry, we need to go to the bottom of page 3. Yes, there. So you say, hi, John, 2nd of January 2014. Trust you had a good Christmas and New Year period. As promised, I've been in discussion with the Research Authority and received the response below in relation to determination of fire resistance. Sorry, I couldn't get it back to you before you took leave. As we discussed at our last meeting, acceptability is determined by the associated product specification and combination, including cavity barriers. Please just ask if I can assist with anything else in relation to your registered detail application. And then you can see below that you basically set out the extracts from Mr. Jones's email. So it says firstly from the BBA certificate, and you've just copied Mr. Jones's email back to Mr. Roper. And then if you look at the bottom of page 5, the final 2 paragraphs are identical to the language that Mr. Jones used about class, because it's described as class 0, it can be termed a material of limited combustibility. And so in terms of the relevant part of Doc B, it's suitable for use, even at heights over 18 metres. Can you explain why you just simply passed on this information if you didn't understand it at the time and you couldn't be sure whether it was technically correct?
I assumed that I made the assumption it was technically correct because I'd gone to my peers to ask that very question. And, I know it's completely wrong. At the time, and even when I sent that, because I remember sending this email out, I was not happy with myself for sending it out because I couldn't provide an answer from myself, that I had to go to somebody else on it.
Yes. Mr. Roper gave evidence to the inquiry, and he said he didn't go back and correct you because he thought it was advantageous for Celotex not to.
Quite.
Yes. Now, we can see from the emails that Mr. Roper responds to you, but the next point I want to ask you about is you then go back to him and explain that Tim Bartlett at West Suffolk is going to do the research work for the Registered Details Certificate. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
He was the man that did it. Now, we know that the Registered Details Manual requires the selection of the research authority to be based on their technical expertise. Did you take steps to find out what Mr. Bartlett's technical expertise was before you put the Celotex work to him?
Only in so much as Tim was on the Registration and Partnerships group and regularly involved in peer reviews for the registered details that we did. So I took the fact that he was part and parcel of that and very active on that group, that he was capable of undertaking the Celotex registered detail, and he was in the adjacent authority. It worked very well.
Yes. But does it follow from your answers that no specific questions were asked of him about his knowledge of these quite complicated areas within ADB, given the testing information that you had?
Absolutely, and I think you asked me on Thursday the question, and in hindsight, having some form of register of competencies is something that we should have strived to pursue.
What we see then is, if we go to LABC 40279, on the 17th of June 2014, Mr. Roper sends to Mr. Bartlett, copying you in, an email headed Celotex RS5000 data, and he's attaching various pieces of information. And he says, Tim, hope you're well, and thank you again for your visit last week. I trust you found the tour of our manufacturing facility useful. So Tim Bartlett's obviously had a tour as well around Celotex. And he says, please find attached the first batch of information to support our application for a registered detail. And he says, as discussed, our aim is to provide you with the support materials to develop detail which entails the following. And you can see he's got some wording there about what he wants the certificate to say. And in the third little dash, it says, Celotex RS5000 has successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2, meets the criteria set in BR 135, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings with stories above 18 metres in height, subject to the board being fixed to a non-combustible substrate, alternative compliance to ADB. Now, do you recognise that? Because that is, in effect, and these bullets all reflect very closely what the wording that Kingspan had suggested before its registered details certificate in August 2013, and the language that was used in that appendix for the registered details certificate for K15. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you appreciate that at the time, that they were effectively seeking the same broad statements as has been made for Kingspan K15?
I suppose I did. It was pending the results of the tests that they were having undertaken on part 2, but certainly it was laying Celotek's aims out.
Yes. And then on the 17th of June, if we go to LABC 40329, Mr. Roper sends another email to Mr. Bartlett, copying you in. This is bottom of page 3 I want to look at. Mr. Roper says this: Tim, find attached updated BRE holding letter confirming we have passed BR 135 and meet compliance to ADB. Now, let's look at that holding letter. It's at LABC 40285. Here it says, it's addressed to Mr. Roper from Mr. Howard of the BRE, 17th of June 2014. Dear Mr. Roper, the BS 8414 Part 2 fire test on the system as supplied and installed by Celotek was tested on the 2nd of May 2014. We have reviewed the data and video footage of the test and confirmed that we are in the process of issuing a test report and a classification document to BR 135. Should you require any further information, please feel free to contact me. So that was a pretty brief letter, wasn't it?
Yes.
Doesn't give any detail about the system that was tested.
No.
Or what conclusions were drawn when it was classified to BR 135, does it?
No.
No. Now, on the 30th of June, just going forward with the story, if we go to LABC 40306, Mr. Bartlett sends an email to you and Mr. Brennan saying, good morning, Cathal and David. I leave the West Suffolk service today and regrettably I have not been able to finalise the Celotek's registered solution application as I await requested information from them. And he goes on, however, I am satisfied that when this info is forthcoming, it will satisfy the requirements. This information is an updated Class 0 spread of fire test report underpinning information for their PRR lambda value and model constructional details. However, in anticipation that this will be forthcoming, I've attached a drafted compliance declaration form, drawing and document list and briefing note. It's worth noting that this is actually their FR 5000 product, simply tested and rebadged to be used above 18 metres in height. I've also requested Celotek send their additional information when available to my email address on the Regional Awards website. I will send the details Celotek have provided in a follow-up email. So it's clear, isn't it, that this compliance declaration form and drawing and document list were prepared by Mr. Bartlett without having sight of the BR 135 classification report from the BRE.
Yes, I think he'd taken it in good faith that there was a classification report that would be forthcoming. So because he was finishing at the authority, he'd taken the liberty of completing effectively the paperwork pending issue of that document.
Yes, but can we agree that that was a fundamentally flawed approach, given that for any statement in relation to its use above 18 metres, that classification report would be of critical importance, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Do you think that at this time you were still under the misapprehension that if it had got a report, a classification report to BR 135, then the product could be used above 18 metres in any situation?
I think I might have been, yes.
Yeah. And did it set alarm bells ringing for you that you're told here that it's actually their FR 5000 product simply tested and rebadged? Did you compare that with what you'd been told about it being a new product when you'd seen Celotek's in November 13?
I took the view that it was that product being tested for something different. Whether it set alarm bells ringing, I can't say. I can't say that I recall feeling that.
Yes. Now let's look at the documents that Mr. Bartlett attached to his email. If we go to LABC 40307, this is the Commission Pack Compliance Declaration Form. And then section 2, it says there at the top of the page, under title of registered detail, second row down, Celotex RS5000 PIR insulation board for use in rain screen construction, including above 18 metres in height. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
If you then we go to page 2, section 4, it lists the supporting information, and you can see that there's some information outstanding.
Yes.
And missing, and it's relied on at point 5, the holding letter from the BRE. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then page 3, section 5, under limitations of use, it says for use only in rain screen wall construction, including above 18 metres height. Yes?
Yes, it does.
Did you read those documents at the time they were sent by Mr. Bartlett?
I'm not sure if I did, because they were sent through for effectively collating and going up onto peer review.
Yes. And if we look at the other attachment, the drawing and documents list he sent, if we go to LABC 40308, we can see, and under supporting documentation reference numbers, he's got the BRE letter, 17th of June, confirming classification of product to BR135. It doesn't say in red, to come, BR135 test report, does it? Sorry, BR135 classification report, does it?
No, it doesn't.
He says what's to come below that. He's got to come, BRE test report to indicate class 0 spread of flame, underpinning data regarding thermal conductivity and model construction details. And then if we go down the page to advice notes, it says effectively exactly what Mr. Roper had wanted it to say. Celotex RS5000 has successfully tested to 8414 Part 2, meets the criterion BR135, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings with stories above 18 metres in height. Do you see that?
Yes.
So again, did you read that document when it was sent through?
Again, that would have been all of the collated data ready to go out to the peer review.
This effectively gave global approval for the use of Celotex RS5000 for use above 18 metres, didn't it? As drafted like this. I appreciate it's not complete.
In terms of the wording, it does, yes.
Yeah. There's then a series of emails between you and Mr. Bartlett, and you bring him up to speed with some of the exchanges you've had with the NHBC about Kingspan's product. We don't need to go to those. And then if we go to LABC 40339, on the 24th of July 2014, Mr. Bartlett emailed you, we believe this is from his wife's email address. I beg your pardon, he emails Mr. Brennan and he copies you in about the Celotex registered detail, and he says, "Good afternoon, Cathal. Please find attached all the documentation for Celotex registered detail 491. That was the number for the RS5000 registered detail certificate, wasn't it?
Yes.
Please replace all the documentation previously sent as there's been updates to content and descriptions. I feel this is satisfactory now for peer review. John Roper of Celotex will no doubt be chasing you in the next couple of weeks to see how the review is going. He also wants to see a draft version of the compliance certificate. I don't know if you do this. However, I can draft the details for this under the new template and send this to you in readiness if you wish." So he's saying it's ready for peer review. And we can see that these documents going out for peer review. If you go to LABC 305564.
Can I just point out there as well that the attachments include the BBA letter for FR5000?
Yes. The BBA letter for the FR5000 product.
In terms of, so again, that was the old product that was there, And that's only...
Yes. Yes. So if we go to LABC 305564, here we can see the registered details certificate for Celotex going out for peer review. Now, it's sent to a large number of people, including Barry Turner, including you. Are the LABC people just copied in for information here?
Yes.
Yeah. And what you're actually wanting is responses from the peer reviewers, is that correct?
Yes, we need four positive votes from the members of the Registration Partnerships Group.
Yeah. And it's described as it says in the blue text, second part of the blue text, registered details 491, Celotex GS5000 installation panel, votes due by Thursday the 7th of August 2014. Now, is that reference to GS5000 an error? Should it have said RS5000?
I think it should have said RS5000.
So that's the peer review going out.
Yes.
And on the same day, later that day, if we can go to LABC 305566, you email Mr. Bartlett, second email down on page 1. You say this: "Hi Tim, just looking at the documentation provided, when I last spoke to John Roper, they were having fire testing done on the product. The BRE report appears to confirm class 0, but I had thought that it would be through BS 8414 Part 1, the standard Kingspan are now testing their product against. I am at Kingspan tomorrow, so we'll ask some questions around their approach to testing." So you're obviously surprised that you've not seen any evidence of BS 8414 test reports. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it is. It's a supporting document.
Yes. And Mr. Bartlett responds to your email on the same day at the top of page 1. He says this: "Hello, David. One of the documents submitted is a letter from BRE stating that they have tested for compliance with BS 8414 and it satisfied the requirement. Please see attached. Apparently they are still awaiting the test report from the BRE, but have this letter as a holding measure, hoping we accept it as proof of compliance for their pressing August 5th launch." And he goes on, "To be honest, it's been a bit of a struggle getting all of the information from Celotex, and any delay has all been down to them. I will contact John Roper and remind him we need the full report in due course." So just pausing there, the peer reviewers have clearly not been sent the BRE classification report to 135 because Celotex have not yet provided it to the LABC. That's right, isn't it?
It is, yes, it's correct.
Can you explain why peer reviewers were being sent the registered details documentation for approval without the BRE report having been received about the testing that had been done, the system testing that had been done?
I can't. I mean, there is, again, faith in the fact that the BRE says it's they're preparing a classification report and it achieves what it's supposed to, but it should have had the report with the classification report with it.
Yes, because you can't begin to certify it properly, can you?
No.
Given that 8414 and BR135 is system specific.
Yes.
You can't begin to certify it unless you know what the system is.
No.
And is it fair that everybody at this point is still working on the basis that it's going to be a global approval, that once you've got that letter from the BRE, you could go tick, it can be used over 18 metres? That's the basis on which everyone's erroneously proceeding at this point. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, it looks that way. And certainly sent out to members of the peer review. I'm not sure whether there was any commentary around where is the classification report.
There's a further email from you. If we go to this, LABC 40369, bottom of page 1, following your meeting with Kingspan, if we go to the bottom of page 1, it's 25th of July at 5:28. Yes, there at the bottom. You say, to Tim Bartlett and Mr. Brennan, "Hi Tim, just got back from Kingspan. They have been testing to BS 8414 in line with the requirements of BR 135 need to look that one up. They also point out, quite correctly, that it is the fire engineer who is ultimately responsible for the choice of materials, and that he or she would base their decision on what the elements of construction need to achieve. Ultimately, K15 can't be classed as a non-combustible material, but they have fire stops at 3.5 metre centres and the test report to demonstrate adequacy. Think we have nailed it. Trouble is, I won't see the reports for a few weeks. And then you go on and talk about something else. Now, when you said in those first lines, going back to the bottom of page 1, that Kingspan have tested to 8414 in line with the requirements of BR 135, need to look that one up. Can we read from that you weren't aware of what BR 135 was at this point?
No, I think that was attempt at humour with Tim. That used to be a standard commentary when we were talking around all the registered details as a phrase of need to look one up. And it's clearly not fitting in the context of today. In terms of the
Sorry, I don't follow. Why were you joking about need to look that one up? What, because it was so obvious you needed to be aware of it?
Well, yes, in terms of understanding that there's a BR 135 classification report, which is what we were missing from Celotex. It was an attempt at humour between Tim and myself around looking at documentation, and it falls miserably in this context. But we were effectively, I was advising him that we needed the 8414, the Part 1, Part 2 test and the classification report in terms of the complete package from Celotex for the specification that they were proposing to, or that they've had tested.
Right. I mean, you've had the friendly warning email just a few days before this, just 10 days before, on the 15th
Yes.
of July 2014. Wasn't it pretty concerning that you didn't have this BR 135 classification report at this point?
Yes, and ultimately the registered detail hadn't been issued at this stage either.
You say you agreed with Kingspan that it was the fire engineers who was ultimately responsible for the choice of materials. Did you think that this somehow discharged the LABC's own responsibility to rigorously check the product and the system for compliance?
No, it was if it was a what's referred to as a desktop exercise from a fire engineer looking at the structural build-up, it would still be the decision of the local authority building control teams as to whether they accepted that or not.
Right. And what exactly had you nailed? We can see later in the email you say, I think we've nailed it. What did you mean by that?
I think. Sorry, if I could see.
Sorry, if we go over the page so you can see it. It's the second line. Well, it's right at the end of the first line. Think we have nailed it. Trouble is, I won't see the reports for a few weeks. Is that nailed it in relation to Kingspan?
I think it because I'd met Kingspan. That was around the steps forward that we were going to take in relation to the next iteration of the Kingspan registered detail and the classification reports that would underpin that, which then took place and finalised in, I think, March of 15.
Yes. I see. Mr. Chairman, I think that might be a good moment for a break, if we can.
Yes, thank you. Right, well, Mr. Ewing, we'll have a break at this point. We'll come back, please, at 3:30, and as before, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're away from the room. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Grange. 3:30, please. Yep. Would you ask Mr. Ewing to come back in, please? Okay. Yes. All right, Mr. Ewing, you ready to carry on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Grange.
Yes, thank you. So picking the Celotex story back up again, and I want to look now on the 8th of August 2014. If we go to LABC 305598. You send an email that's at the top of the page to Mr. Brennan and Ms. Lee. You say, morning, completed updates attached for inclusion. The Celotex registered detail is still missing the final reports from BRE evidencing that it complies with the fire testing for use over 18 metres. This is an important document as we are under scrutiny from NHBC regarding Kingspan K15, which is an equivalent product. We need to hold Celotex certificates back until this has been received. I think Tim is back on Monday. So you still seem to be saying at this point that the BRE report is going to evidence that it, i.e. the product, complies with fire testing for use over 18 metres, yes?
Yes.
And then if we go to LABC 40288 at the bottom of page 2, on the 8th of August, you email Mr. Roper, copying in Mr. Bartlett and Mr. Brennan, and you say this, hi John, we have just come across your product launch marketing for RS5000. I'm mindful that Tim Bartlett is still on holiday presently, so excuse me if you've already sent this to him, but we still await your BRE test report verifying adequacy. Would you be able to provide us with the report as soon as possible so that we can generate our certificates and place it onto our website? If you still await this yourself, can you give us an idea of likely timescales so that we can respond to any inquiries we may receive? Now, we can see from an email that you're sent, a separate chain of emails, if we go to LABC 305601 and we look at the bottom of page 1, Mr. Brennan emailed you 8th of August at 10:27, you and Mr. Adungo, saying, I saw that this morning, I don't think there's a problem. And if we go below that email, there's an email from Robert Adungo that he sent to Mr. Brennan, subject, is it true? And what he's done is he's cut and paste what was in Celotex's marketing launch for RS5000. And the text he's cut and paste is supported by LABC approval and suitable for use in both domestic and non-domestic applications. And then he's given a link to the Celotex launch. Celotex reaches new height with premium PIR. Now, what action did you take when you realised that Celotex were marketing their product as having been LABC approved when it wasn't yet approved and had no registered detailed certificate because you still hadn't received the BR 135 classification report for the testing over 18 metres?
Can you just let me know what the date the email I sent to John Roper asking for the...
Yes, that was at midday, 12:02 on the 8th of August.
Right.
So shortly after you're alerted to this,
Yes.
you do send to John Roper an email saying, we've seen your product launch, but we're still awaiting your BRE test report. Would you be able to provide us with the report as soon as possible? Why didn't you express significant dissatisfaction to Mr. Roper that he was launching his product stating there'd been LABC approval without that being the case?
Again, I think I was giving them the benefit of the doubt, and in hindsight, that was not acceptable.
Wasn't that quite a serious matter to claim LABC approval when they didn't have it?
Yes, it was not in place at that time. I don't think it was long before it was actually up on our website, but it still preempts that actual entry onto our website.
Did it cause you to question whether the LABC should be providing a certificate in support of RS 5000 use above 18 metres when Celotex was behaving that way?
It was hinging on the response from Mr. Roper as to what data they had.
Yes. If we go up this email chain, we saw Mr. Brennan, his response at the bottom of page 1. If we go back to that, he says, I saw that this morning. I don't think there's a problem, but David just finished looking at this product, so he'll be able to tell you for sure. No need to retweet it or anything, as we're still awaiting a copy of the test report before issuing certificates. I gave him the okay to reference LABC at the product launch, so no problem with that part. Now, can you help us as to what he means by that last bit? I gave him the okay to reference LABC at the product launch, so no problem with that part. Was it just the timing of it that was a problem?
I think, and again I'm reading into that Celotex had contacted Cahal to see whether they could still do the launch. But I'm I can't offer anything else in addition to that.
Yes. And then if we see the email above that is from you at 11:54. Subject, is it true? Sorry, just spent an hour dealing with conservatories again. I know they were pressing before Tim went on holiday, but haven't even issued draft certificates to Celotex? ? Unless Tim has seen drafts, we haven't anything that proves it works. The BRE letter just says that they're preparing the report, not that it was found to comply. This shouldn't really have been done, particularly with the issue over K15. Kingspan might think we've been delaying the renewal deliberately. I fear another, and I think you're right, another shitstorm brewing, is what you say in the email. Now, can you explain what you meant by that last comment?
I think Kingspan had a renewal around that time. It was whether there was any, I suppose, allegations of favouritism between the two companies who clearly were competing against one another. And that's about as much as I can offer, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Why are you more concerned about what Kingspan would think of the LABC rather than Celotex's inappropriate behaviour?
I don't have an answer for that. I've just always tried to be, I suppose, consistent and fair. And I didn't want it to be seen that it was any sort of preferential treatment there.
Right. Mr. Brennan, if we look at the next email up, he responds again. Next email up on page 1. He says, bollocks. I'd read Tim's email saying that the BRE letter states that they have tested for compliance with BS 8414 and it satisfies the requirement. It got the 4 votes on peer review too. Now, do you know which peer reviewers voted in favour of RS 5000 being granted the registered details certificate?
I'm sorry, I don't. Again, it would be the online voting system.
Can you explain how they could have done that in the absence of a report from the BRE about the 8414 testing, given, as you had pointed out in your emails, that testing was so central to the claims made in the registered details certificate?
I can't answer that, no. And again, it's in terms of the approval process, this is 4 peers looking through the same information or the overview of the same information, and I would have hoped that it might have said, I agree on condition of being sent the actual classification report when it's available, or something along those lines.
Yes, there's no evidence that that's what they said, is there?
No, there's not.
It looks like they simply approved it.
Yes.
Given that you said you needed to place the certificate on hold, did you consider requesting that the peer reviewers reconsider the application once you got the BRE report?
I can't recall whether it went for a second vote.
Well, let's keep going with the correspondence. If we go to LABC 305602, second email down on page 1, Mr. Brennan says, no, the quote in my email below was from Tim. To be honest, I'm not even sure I read the letter, just Tim's summary. And then he says, balls. So Mr. Brennan obviously thinks he's messed up because he's read the letter, or actually Mr. Bartlett's summary of the letter from the BRE as confirming that the product had that classification, yes?
Yes.
And then what we see is Mr. Roper does provide you with the BR135 classification report. If we go to LABC 40288, we can see at 12:05, Mr. Roper sends it to you, copying in Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Brennan. David, many thanks for your email. Please find attached the BR135 classification for Celotex RS5000. So you get that the same day. Did you read that BR135 report when it came in?
I must have done, but I can't recall.
Let's look at it together. LABC 40289. There's the report. It's dated the 4th of August 2014. If we can go within it to page 12 and look at paragraph 5.2, it says at the end, classification, the system described in this classification report has been tested and met the performance criteria set out in Annex B of BR135 2013. And then under 5.3 field of application, this classification is valid only for the system as installed and detailed in section 2 of this classification report and the associated details found in the related test reports. And then under limitations, it says this classification document does not represent type approval or certification of the product. So the the classification report itself was very clear about it being a system approval and not a type approval or certification of the product. Do you see that?
Yes.
You email Mr. Brennan, if we go LABC 305602, at the top of the page, so 12:23, I think it might be plus 1 hour possibly, can breathe a bit easier now. The BRE test is everything needed to satisfy criteria contained in 12.5 and 12.6 in ADB. Can wait until Monday for Tim to confirm he's okay with the document and close his work. So again, you appear to think that this gives some form of global approval to K15. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it appears.
And then on the 11th of August 2014, if we go to LABC 305603, at the bottom of page 1, there's an email from Mr. Basson to you and Mr. Turner. And he says, hi, gents, this was in Meltwater News yesterday, so I wonder how the Kingspan issue has gone. Is this correct, by the way, about registered details? And he's set out a quote. Celotex reaches new heights with premium PIR. The UK's leading manufacturer of PIR installation, Celotex, has once again demonstrated its innovative applications, including buildings above 18 metres in height, supported by LABC approval and suitable for use in both domestic and non-domestic. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you respond to Mr. Basson's email at the top of the page. You say, hi Doug, picked it up on Friday. Celotex do not have their certificate as yet. We had been waiting for the BRE report and the return of Tim Bartlett from holiday to complete the registered details process. But it has been through peer review. Chased it Friday afternoon and BRE test attached appears to fulfil criteria and compliance with ADB 12.5 to 12.8. I'm assuming Kingspan are also having the same testing done. Note it's only for the fixing criteria specified, and this will be in the limitations of the certificate, but it almost matches Kingspan's old BBA approval. Now, how are you satisfied that the testing that had been provided shows compliance with ADB paragraphs 12.5 to 12.8? Can you explain that now?
I can't, and in light of what I know now, and certainly what I knew in the months after that, that again is an incorrect statement.
Did you take any steps in response to Celotex having marketed misleading information about RS5000 based on the LABC approval? Or said to be based on LABC approval?
Not that I'm aware of. And again, as I said, with Kingspan, Celotex had every opportunity to come back to us and offer a correction. But the role from our side, as you mentioned, was that of gatekeeper, and we haven't done our job here.
Yeah. And when you say, but it has been through peer review, you're not referring to another peer review, are you, that's happened between the 8th and the 11th of August? You're talking about the peer review we saw, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Bartlett sends you an email having received the BRE report. If we go to LABC 305608, and I want to look at the third email down on page 1. Mr. Bartlett says there, 11th of August at 22:05 to you, copying in Mr. Brennan. Hello, David. This all looks in order, although the test is for a very specific system rather than general use of the Celotex product above 18 metres. What do you think? Should we be limiting this to the very specific makeup of rain screen construction in the test? Kind regards, Tim. So he's raising that concern. And you respond one email up in the chain. And you say, hi, Tim, hope you had a good holiday. This is on August the 12th. Yes, the registered details should relate to that which it has been tested against. It's actually not too far off the specification Kingspan used to have on their BBA certificate. It should be added to the limitations on the certificate. I suppose the rain screen construction is relatively standard. The BRE test states installed between the floor slab hangers on the main cladding wall. The critical part is therefore the light steel frame, number of fixings, 12mm magnesium oxide board, and the horizontal and vertical fire breaks. Now, on what basis did you suppose that the rain screen construction was relatively standard?
In hindsight, I didn't have any basis for making that statement whatsoever.
No. That's a wholly misplaced assumption, isn't it? You can have all sorts of different rain screen materials.
Yes.
Some of which, and they may behave very differently in fire, yes?
Quite.
Then Mr. Bartlett responds at the top of page 1. If we go to the top email, and he says in the third line down, I've now updated the compliance declaration and altered the certificate template and attached both. And then below that, in the next paragraph, he says, what is the procedure now we have this update? As I see from the peer review, all had essentially been okay with the registered details, although they were, of course, not aware of the continuing developments. I've changed the date on the compliance declaration to today, etc. And he goes on, and he said also, I know that John Roper wished to see the final certificate before it was released for general consumption. So that's his response. So he's noting that the peer reviewers hadn't been aware of continuing developments. Now, we know from the registered detailed manual that it states that following the peer review, the draft certificate and final drawing and document list should be forwarded to the registered details applicant and the registered details manager for final checking. Now, who was that in this instance? Can you help us?
The manager would be myself.
Did you check the final certificate and the drawings and document list as part of a final checking process?
I'm not sure that I actually did, no.
let's have a look at the certificate. The certificate itself appears at LABC 40362. This is that first registered details certificate for the Celotex RS 5000 PIR insulation board. We can see it's dated the 21st of August 2014 and it's valid for a year until the 21st of August 2015. And let's go to the important drawing and document list which accompanied it. That's at LABC 40361. So there we can see under limitations of use, it says for use in rain screen wall construction, including above 18 metres in height. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then below that, we've got the wording that's becoming familiar now, particularly in the second part as well as the first part. But that second part reads, Celotex RS 5000 has successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2, meets the criteria set out in BR 135, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings with stories above 18 metres in height, subject to the board being fixed to non-combustible substrate, alternative compliance to ADB. So that's the wording that Mr. Roper wanted, yes?
Yes.
Which is the wording that was based on the wording that was originally suggested by Kingspan for its product.
Yes.
It's not system specific, as Mr. Bartlett had flagged in his email. Should we be limiting this to the very specific makeup of rain screen construction in a test? That's not happened, has it?
Other than listing the global test report classification at 295255. No, it hasn't.
Well, yes, it's got the test report there. So if someone bothered to go and read the test report and get to the end of the test report, they might see the passages we looked at earlier.
Yes.
But you'd be forgiven for thinking, wouldn't you, just reading this, that you could use it in all circumstances over 18 metres in height?
Yes, you could.
Can you explain how that certificate came to be issued in that form?
No, lack of knowledge really in terms of bringing that all together, and that's it's apparent.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I oversaw the issue of the certificate. I should have picked that up, as should the peer reviewers undertaking the review of the research authority's work.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Bartlett then sends an email copying you in. If we go to LABC 305623 on the 2nd of September 2014, second email down on page 1, and I want to look at the second paragraph. He says this: I sent you an email a week ago asking about the status of registered detail 491 Celotex RS 5000. I note there's been no posts on the forum for a month now regarding this, and I haven't had any further contact with John Roper. I just want to make sure this hasn't stagnated, and also to make sure there's nothing more for me to do. Also, I'd like to know when it would be appropriate for me to get my former authority to invoice the LABC for the agreed fee. So he seems to think that this should have been ongoing, and at the top of the page, on the same day, Mr. Brennan responds to him saying, hi Tim, sorry, been a bit snowed under. He copies you in, by the way. The Celotex registration has gone through okay. Copies of the registration certificates are attached for reference. So he fills in Mr. Bartlett and said, well, it's all gone through in August, yes?
Yes.
Now, following forward with the story, if we go to LABC 40364, we can see on the 8th of October, so a month later, you send revised certificates, we saw this before, for both Kingspan and the Celotex product. You just put revised certs. And if we go to what you attached, we see LABC 40368. This is the new style registered details certificate for RS 5000. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is a draft of that. And if we look in the description of product, we can see that it says, this is an assessment of a PIR insulation board by Celotex designed for use within rain screen construction, and it describes it. And it says it goes through the same manufacturing process as the Celotex FR5000 product, the difference being it has been assessed by the BRE and complies with BR135 for use in rain screen applications above 18 metres in height. See conditions of certificate for more information. Now, can you explain what you were doing at this point? You were clearly putting the Celotex information into this new form certificate, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you trying to tighten up the certificate at this point as well?
Yes.
But again, can you see now that the wording you've used, which is very similar to what we saw with the later Kingspan certificates, on one reading still implies global use of the product in this first important section, yes?
Yes, other than the notation about, see, the conditions of certificate for more information,
Yeah.
which highlighted the specific classification report specification.
And if we go over the page 2, under scope of registration, in the second paragraph, it says Celotex RS5000 has been successfully tested to BS8414 Part 2, meets the criteria set out in BR135, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings with stories above 18 metres in height, subject to matching the specification criteria of the BRE fire test report carried out as alternative compliance to ADB. Now, again, you have put the words in parenthesis, and you have said subject to matching the specification criteria of the BRE fire test report. But can you see how the words you've got before that are potentially problematic? Because again, you're suggesting that the product can be successfully tested to that standard.
Yes, I can. Well, in hindsight, we could rewrite it a lot clearer, a lot tighter. But again, I thought that wording covered the purposes for which I wanted it to cover, which was highlighting that it was only the classification report specification that was appropriate.
Yes. Now let's go forward. So and look at what happened subsequently. So if we go to LABC 302803. And if we go right to the bottom of this email chain, on page 2, I think it is, right at the bottom, there's an email dated the 3rd of November 2014 from Sam Lee to John Roper, and it's headed Important Changes to Your LABC Registration. And it says, as part of the recent improvements LABC has made to register details scheme and website, there have been several important changes made to your registration with us. New certificates. A new registration certificate has been created for your system solution, providing your clients with more detailed information about your product. So here, is this right, that Sam Lee is writing to Celotex to tell them that you've got this new style certificate that you're proposing to use in the future? Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's what we just saw
Yes.
you'd done a draft of?
Yep.
So you're telling Celotex about that. And then if we go to the bottom of page 1, on the 6th of November, Debbie Berger of Celotex emails back to Sam Lee saying, hi Sam, please find attached some paragraphs of text as suggested for use in your LABC certificates and fact sheets for RS5000. And she's summarised what the headline points are: to replace the description of product in both certificates, to replace the first paragraph starting with Celotex has provided test reports, to replace the third paragraph. And in the description of product, what we can see from separate documents, one of the things they wanted is they didn't want it to be clear on the face of the certificate that it was the same product as FR5000. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So Debbie Berger comes back with some changes. And then one email up on the page, we can see that you're looped in at this point. You can just go up. Sam Lee says to you on the 6th of November, to you, "Hi David, Celotex have asked if we can make some changes to the wording on their certificates as attached. I've attached the current certificate for your reference to see what it currently says. They've also asked if we can take out any references that RS5000 is the same product as FR5000. And then if we go up the page to the next email, we can see on the 28th of November, so kind of 3 weeks later, you go back. Sorry, I beg your pardon. There's another email from Sam Lee to you, 28th of November, from her to you. "Hi David, were you able to have a look at the suggested changes from Celotex, the attached Word doc relating to their email below? This one is not currently on the website as they asked for us to hide it from the public while we sorted out the changes. Thanks, Sam." Now, there's another email chain around this time which helps us on this. If we go to CEL 408691 and look at the bottom of page 1, Debbie Berger to Sam Lee. If we go over the page, I think we see, she says, "Hi Sam, I've just noticed the website is live with the certificate and fact sheet. Is it possible to limit visibility or better remove these until we've sorted out the wording?" And then if we look at the top of page 1, Sam Lee goes back to Debbie Berger. "Hi Debbie, sorry for the delay in getting round to your emails. No problem at all. We'll check with my colleague who deals with the website if we can make your landing page not visible to members of the public. I will check with my manager to see if we can make the suggested changes in your attachment on the certificates and website." Now, it appears to be the case that the new form certificate was put up on the website on the 3rd of November 2014, but then removed 3 days later. Is that correct?
At the request of Celotex, yes.
Yes, and these emails suggest that, and that's what you've told us in your witness statement.
Yes.
Now, my question for you is, what happened to the old Celotex RS5000 certificate from August 2014? Was that still available on the LABC website, or was it just the new certificate that was not available?
Well, as far as I'm aware, the new certificate replaced the one that was issued in August and then was withdrawn from the website on
Right.
the 6th of November.
So is your understanding that nothing would have been available on the website from the 6th of November at all?
That's right. Right the way through, I think, to the following July.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that because we'll come to some emails that suggest that there was something up on the website during that time. So
Right.
let's have a look. In terms of the changes that Ms Berger had suggested, if we go to LABC 301780, and we look at the second email down on page 1, Mr Brennan says on the 3rd of December, "I don't think we should be making many of these changes. They're a bit too marketing for what we should be aiming for. She also wants us to say that the BBA have certified RS5000 as achieving a specific U value, but I don't see any mention of that product in the letter from BBA. What we have written is correct from what I can see. What do you think, David?" So Mr Brennan is not keen on what's been suggested. And you then say this on the 4th of December at the top of the page. You say, "Sorry, I haven't been back with this. The reason is I need to sit down with Barry to decide on our stance with Kingspan K15. A result may be that it knocks into Celotex if we take NHBC's view that all PUR products are unsuitable over 18 metres. Any move forward will probably include the wording, the RD is only valid if the specification detailed is complied with explicitly. As such, marketing jargon like this won't feature." So that's your response. So you say you've got to sit down with Barry to decide on what you're going to do, and it does seem at this time that you're aware that NHBC's view is that all PUR products are unsuitable over 18 metres, yes?
Correct.
And you indicate that if you move forward, the wording might become very tight, yes?
Yes.
Now, were Celotex ever told that there was no detail about its product on the LABC website? So not only that the new form certificate had been taken down, but that the old form certificate wasn't there either?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
We can't see that Celotex were ever told you mustn't use the August 2014 certificate. We've taken down the new form certificate while we agree on the wording, but for the avoidance of doubt, that old certificate shouldn't be passed on to anybody. Did you ever say that to them?
I don't know. The assumption is if they were trying to search to validate it on the website, it wouldn't have been there. So it would have generated a query as to why they couldn't find it anymore on our website.
But the difficulty is that Celotex had that 21st of August 2014 certificate and document and drawings list. How did you know that they weren't using it to market their product in the interim?
I didn't. And I'm assuming that they had some integrity in knowing that from November the registered detail had changed.
Right. We then pick it up in May 2015. We can see an email quite a few months later. If we go to LABC 40332, here we see quite a long email you sent to Miss Berger at this point. You say, "Hi, Miss Berger. Sam had previously referred to your amendment requests for RS 5000 to me. As I'm responsible for our registered detail scheme and have been involved for some time in discussions regarding the suitability of insulation material above 18 metres in height, LABC were contacted in connection with the wording used in earlier registered detail certificates. There was concern that the certificates implied a global approval to the use of thermosets above 18 metres. This had never been the intention, but as a result of this, and also proposed amended national guidance, wording within certificates has been altered to clarify the acceptability of the use of thermoset insulating products when a classification report demonstrating compliance with BR 135 through testing to either 8414 Part 1 or 2 has been undertaken." Then you say, "The question of the adequacy of thermosetting materials was raised at the National Building Control Alliance meeting held on 8th of December. The BCA is the representative body of building control service providers, and LABC represent local authorities at this group." And you refer then to the technical guidance note 18 issued by the BCA. And then you say that the attached document highlights the intended amendments and will be publicly available in the near future. As such, I attached a revised certificate incorporating your requests together with additional inserts clarifying the method taken to demonstrate compliance, i.e. ADB 12.5 or option 2 on the attached BCA guide. Apologies that this has not been achieved sooner, but the proposed amendments to the guidance have taken much longer than anticipated. I would also draw your attention to the notation on the certificate, and then you draw her attention to that, and then you go on to deal with the point about falling debris. I trust that you'll find this acceptable. The wording used is the same as that contained in the Kingspan K15 registered detail and would be included with any future thermoset product seeking registered detail status and intended to be used above 18 metres. If you could confirm this, I can post the new certificate onto the website for you. Kind regards, David. Now, this appears to be the first time that you're telling Celotex that there'd been any problem with the registered detail certificate. Is that right?
Other than the amended version sent in the November, I think it probably is, and that's certainly from my side down to the fact that John Roper had moved on from the organisation. I think there was a sort of a dead end there. It was only Debbie Berger that picked it up in the November, I think.
Yes. Is it surprising that you've not written to them earlier saying there was a concern that the certificates implied global approval to the use of thermosets above 18 metres? Why didn't you tell her much earlier?
Well, I think there is this email is a result of the draft for the first amendment to building control BCA guidance note. So I was again harmonising that with the revised document as well, and I thought I was making it absolutely clear what the step forward was going to be.
Yes, but there was nothing in the revised version of the BCA technical guidance note that touched upon option 1 or option 2, was there? I.e. either the linear route to compliance through 12.5, etc., including limited combustibility materials for insulation, or the alternative route of BS 8414 on a system test. There was nothing in the BCA technical guidance note that was being amended that touched upon that question, was there?
Well, I think there was a tightened definition of thermosets included in there, and I think there was also a recommendation of the variation reports by a suitable UCAS accredited body for varying any tested specification. So to my mind, and they were the comments I fed through to Barry Turner earlier in the year on that, after February's discussion with BRE. So I felt it important to map that out.
Right. Let's look at the draft certificate that you attached, LABC 40333. Here's your draft. We've got under description of product, we could zoom in. It says in the final 6 lines, it has been assessed by the BRE and complies with BR 135 for use in rain screen applications above 18 metres in height, subject to the board being fixed to a non-combustible substrate. See conditions of certificate for more information. So we've got the same, as you pointed out in your email, the same statement that you'd put in the K15 later certificates, yes?
Yes.
Potentially implying global approval on this front page.
Well, again, I'll point out the C condition of certificate to try and ensure, and in the wording on the second page, that it was explicit according to the specification.
Yes. And then page 2, if we go conditions of certificate, bottom of the page, you've got there, it begins, for use in rain screen wall construction, including above 18 metres in height. I mean, that sentence is pretty broad, isn't it?
Yes.
And then
but it does expand
further
on that
down,
further down.
7 lines down, you've got for use on buildings with a floor more than 18 metres above ground level, Celotex RS 5000 has been successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2 and meets the criteria set out in Annex B of BR 135. Again, you're saying that the product itself has been successfully tested. Now, that's not right, is it?
No, it's been tested as part of a system.
Yes, and then we do get that, in fairness to you. It then says this classification is only valid for the system specification and detailing outlined in Section 2 of the BRE classification report, including associated details found in Section 4. And then you give an explanation of the system below that and what it comprised. But can you see how that wording could have been much clearer if you're trying to imply that it's system specific? You could have begun that conditions of certificate saying for use above 18 metres only in one specific system configuration, and this is it.
Yes, it could.
And this certificate, this wording, appears to be the same as that which is eventually issued on the 10th of September 2015, when it comes to be issued the following summer. Now, on the 12th of May, Ms Muller emailed you, if we go to LABC 308654, so on the 12th of May, Sam Muller says, "Hi David, attached is the amended Celotex certificate with the changes that they requested previously. Not sure if you want me to stick draft watermark on the certificates." Now, if we look at this certificate that Sam Lee Muller is sending, LABC 2017291, this is much broader, this certificate. you can see in the description of product, in the last 5 lines, it has been assessed by the BRE and complies with BR 135 for use in rain screen applications above 18 metres in height, subject to the board being fixed to a non-combustible substrate. Was this a draft that Miss Lee was sending you for you to then make the amendments we just saw? We couldn't work out where this draft came into it.
Well, I'm a bit confused myself, I'm honest, because there was no note there about the specific conditions in relation to scope and limitations.
Yes.
So I think this preceded the one you've just shown me.
Yes, okay. And then can we look at LABC 40330? This is you on the 1st of July 2015 saying to Miss Muller about the Celotex registered details. You say this: "Hi Sam, can you just check the current certificate on the public end of the website? The attached was the reworked one that was sent to Celotex for comment. I was at Recitel yesterday, another rigid insulation company, and brought the Celotex one up. If we have received nothing back from Celotex, then the attached should be put up straight away, please." Now, this is what's led us to be confused as to whether, in fact, there was something on your website at this point, which was a certificate for RS 5000. Because you ask Miss Muller to check the current certificate on the public end of the website. Can you help us as to what was that current certificate?
I think that question is more about whether we've actually got a certificate visible on the website as opposed to which version it is. We were waiting for a response back from Celotex. We sent the draft.
But I thought you told us earlier that on the 6th of November, when the new form certificate was taken down, nothing would appear on your website.
That's right. That's what I was checking to see what was actually, if anything was visible. So I've clearly forgotten that the document's been taken down in November on the basis of preparing the new drafts that were there.
I see. How sure can you be that the document was taken down in November and that, for example, the August certificate didn't stay up?
I can't give you that assurance because I wasn't involved with the technical aspect of that.
Right. And what had Recitel said to you about the Celotex certificate which prompted you to send this email to Miss Lee at this point?
Again, I'm struggling. Recticel is another manufacturer of insulation, and I don't know whether I went to the registered details site to show them what things look like on the site and couldn't get to Celotex. That's as much as I can guess over that statement.
And if we can go to CEL 403739 and look on page 2. We see an email from Miss Muller, or Miss Lee Muller, to Mr. Roper, and then copying in Miss Berger on the 22nd of July 2015. And she says, "Hi John, your LABC registration will expire on the 21st of August. Can you please confirm if you'd like to renew your registration with us and for how long?" Now, do you accept that that implies that there is some kind of ongoing registration that's expiring?
Yes, I think the August registered detail of 2014 had been paid for 12 months. The 12-month date was coming up even though there's nothing been visible on the website from November through to the July time.
I see. So that's not inconsistent with the fact there hadn't been anything on the website for...
I don't think so. I mean, I suppose the question was, were we being fair to them if there's nothing been present on the website for that period of time? But it was purely if they wanted to continue.
Yeah. I mean, we can't find Celotex ever being told, it's really important that you don't use the original August 2014 certificate to market your product because we don't accept that's accurate.
Right.
Why don't we see something to that effect?
Other than the draft that was sent on the November date, I can't answer the question. I mean, it was the assumption, certainly from our side, was that this is a replacement for the one that's been issued.
Yeah.
And that was what went up on the site, and the old registered detail was no longer there. And I would have hoped that Celotex would have pointed people towards the website showing the new one, albeit they asked for it to be taken down. So I can't tell you whether they were marketing that
Yeah.
the August registered detail.
Because we looked at it earlier, the August 2014 certificate had a whole year date on it. It said valid till 21st of August 2015, didn't it?
Yes.
Was there ever a formal process by which that certificate was withdrawn by LABC and that clearly communicated to Celotex?
I don't believe that there was. I'm not aware of that. And other than the replacement registered detail in November, from process perspective, that was what we certainly assumed that they would be using and would have appeared on our website if they hadn't asked us to take it down.
Yes. Now, overall, and thinking back at what we've covered over the last 2 days, do you accept that the LABC made serious errors in its registered details certificates for both K15 and Celotex RS5000 over a prolonged period of time when you look at both products?
Certainly the Kingspan registered detail ran from 2009 through to, I think that certainly prior to what I consider to be the tightened registered detail, which was March 2015, and the 8 weeks of the first registered detail for Celotex, which I'm not comfortable with. We should have picked that up and had the wording correct on the August one for them. But it was correct from, as I understand, certainly from my side, correct from the November of 2014. That we could have done better with what we did.
Do you accept that even when warned about the mistakes it had made, particularly with the K15 certificate, LABC stubbornly refused to correct those mistakes and carried on making technically inaccurate statements about K15 and also, in due course, about RS5000?
In terms of stubbornly resist, I wouldn't class it that way. I think from the point of view of having the relevant information to hand to be able to update the registered detail and tighten down on that, there's a recognition that we needed to tighten the registered detail over that time frame, and that was potentially over a 5-month period in 2014. But I wouldn't have said stubbornly resist. We were aware that we needed to change and we needed to improve what we had.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of my pre-prepared
Yes.
questions. I'm sorry I've gone till 4:25.
Well, that's all right.
Perhaps
Anyway,
we
you're
could
going to
have-
need 10 minutes or so, aren't you?
Yes, please. Could we have maybe till 25
Yes.
And then I'll let you know if we need...
Yes, very well. Well, Mr. Ewing, when Council gets to the end of her questions, we always have a short break, partly to enable her to check that she hasn't left anything out, and partly to enable others who are following the proceedings, but not from this room, to suggest other questions that perhaps ought to be put to you. So we'll break for 10 minutes. We'll come back, please, at 5:25, and then we'll see if there are any more questions we need to ask you.
Okay.
All right? Thank you. Would you like to go to the usher, please? Thank you. 5:25.
Thank you.
Would you ask Mr. Ewing to come back in, please? Okay. Mr. Ewing, yes, take a seat. And we'll see if there are any more questions for you. Ms. Grange.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. Thinking back over the matters that we've covered in the last 2 days, is there anything that you would have done differently if you had the chance to do it again and knowing what you know now?
I think there's a few things in terms of process. I think we need needed a more robust email system for monitoring emails that were coming into us to ensure they were responded to. I mentioned in terms of process around an audit trail in relation to competencies for the research authorities and for the peer reviewers. And I would like to think that since Grenfell LABC has actually started that process in relation to competency. From personal side of it, it was my knowledge at the start and my knowledge as it developed through the process of 2014. Clearly, I feel that LABC has been gamed and played by the insulation manufacturers for their own benefit. I'm still struggling to come to terms with why anybody would actually try and sell a product that wasn't fit for purpose, particularly in relation to fire safety. I have real difficulty with that. And I mentioned trust, in that the construction industry can't proceed if you haven't got trust in the information and technical data and standards that we're provided with. And again, I welcome the government's initiative on the National Product Regulator to hopefully sort out and stop golden samples and things like this in terms of the testing criteria. But I think that's probably as much as I can say at the moment. I'm still, personally, I'm upset at being played by manufacturers that should have known better and should have had integrity to work with us rather than for their own gains.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to thank Mr. Ewing for coming and spending the time answering our questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, Mr. Ewing is right that I should thank you very much on behalf of all 3 members of the panel. You've given evidence over a couple of days now, and it's probably been quite a difficult experience in many ways. So we are grateful to you for coming along. It's been very interesting to hear what you have to tell us. We've learned quite a lot. And now, of course, you're free to go. So thank you very much.
I hope it's of use.
Thank you. Right, Ms. Grange, well, that must be it for today.
It is.
Tomorrow we have another witness, but
Yes.
that will be tomorrow.
Yes.
So we'll break now and resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. 10 o'clock tomorrow.